Ukrainian drone strike Russian helicopter. Then this happened at exactly 06:02 hours. A Russian Mi-8 transport helicopter rose into the pale morning sky from a forward outpost in northeastern Ukraine. Inside, an entire assault team was packed shoulder to shoulder, heading straight toward Ukrainian defensive lines. Up to this point, everything about the flight seemed textbook, flying low enough to stay under radar sweeps, tracing the contours of local roads, maintaining radio silence. Yet the pilots had no idea that 3 Ukrainian FPV drone specialists had been hidden in the mist since 0400. Their custom-built racing drones fitted with RPG warheads, waiting for a slim window of opportunity. In 23 minutes, they would attempt something the world had never witnessed. The moment came when all 3 operators felt their phones vibrate at once, a combined alert relayed by Ukrainian partisan scouts. They had strategically spread out to cover every plausible route. One observing the M03 highway, another monitoring the northern agricultural tracks, and a third positioned along the river valley in the south. Missing this single pass meant the Russian assault team would safely reach their objective. The Ukrainian defenders relied heavily on an acoustic detection network installed weeks earlier. This system communicated through a low-power LoRa long-range wireless protocol, capable of sending micropackets of data across 10 kilometers while using less energy than a small LED bulb. Perfect for battery-powered field sensors hidden inside. Gutted smartphones with external microphones disguised as everything from fake stones to trash containers. Their only job was to listen for the deep, rhythmic thump of helicopter blades. Whenever a helicopter's sound signature crossed overhead, the sensors captured the exact millisecond the sound reached them. With sound moving at 343 meters per second, the time differentials allowed precise triangulation. The mate's twin turboshaft engines created a recognizably locked frequency pattern between 20 to 40 Hz, capable of penetrating fog and forest canopy conditions where traditional optics and radar were useless. Solar-fed batteries kept these devices alive for weeks, and through the same LoRa network used by Ukrainian partisans, the system could pinpoint a helicopter's position within 50 meters at a 5 kilometers radius. In essence, the setup worked like a Shazam for aircraft, listening to the sky and classifying targets by acoustic fingerprint. The first sensor picked up a distinctive rotor beta, unmistakable spike near 35 Hz within seconds. 2 more sensors verified it. Their combined timestamps painted a near-exact location. The operator covering the M03 route launched his spotter drone immediately. The northern operator scanned his sensor feed but detected nothing yet. Meanwhile, the southern operator began calculating intercept geometry across all 3 possible flight paths, fully aware that once the helicopter's direction became obvious, they would have mere seconds to act. In the Mi-8 cockpit, the lead pilot glanced at his navigation tablet. A temperature inversion had formed cool air trapped beneath a layer of warm atmosphere, bending sound waves downward and amplifying them across kilometers. The helicopter's unmistakable acoustic footprint now carried up to 5 kilometers instead of the usual 2. The sensors were tracking it in real time. The aircraft maintained roughly 150 kilometers per hour at 40 meters altitude, relying exclusively on visual navigation because any active radio transmission risked Ukrainian anti-air missiles, and GPS had been rendered useless by aggressive jamming from both sides. Intercepting a fast-moving helicopter with tiny FPV drones was mathematically brutal but not impossible. The helicopter was tied to predictable behavior. Stay low, stay steady, follow roads, minimize fuel burn. If the drone teams could forecast its movement and get ahead of it, while a dozen other factors all aligned, they might achieve a world first. The lead operator reached for his primary drone. The Shrikton lying beside him looked like a chaotic blend of Chinese racing parts and a Soviet explosive bolted together. But the piezoelectric trigger linking the PG-7 warhead to the flight controller had corroded during storage. These weren't polished defense contractor weapons. They were improvised combat tools assembled with zip ties and raw persistence. Every solder joint represented a gamble. Every battery connector a silent prayer while he attempted repairs. The acoustic system relayed increasingly urgent updates. Contact, bearing 285, speed 150, altitude 40. The voice in his headset announced the helicopter had unexpectedly veered off the M03 and onto a rugged secondary road, still moving northwest at high speed. Only 7 kilometers remained before it reached Ukrainian positions. Something had spooked the Russian pilot into changing routes. Dawn fog, initially scattered, had merged into a thick wall rolling up from the Dnipro River. In 2 minutes, the Mi-8 would vanish into it. Leaving sound as the only detectable cue. On sound alone wasn't enough for a precise intercept. The northern operator hurried to relocate when his controller abruptly died. The cold had drained the battery to zero. Cursing under his breath, he swapped to a backup power pack insulated with hand warmers. While the helicopter gained yet another kilometer, his backup drone wasn't ideal, shorter battery life, more limited range, but it functioned. A 3S LiPo battery in near-freezing 6 degrees Celsius air would supply scarcely 8 minutes of runtime. The video transmitter output only 1 watt, meaning serious signal breakup past 5 kilometers. But Ukrainian engineering had a guiding principle. If it works even if it's stupid. He glued the faulty connector, hoping it wouldn't melt under motor heat. With precious seconds slipping away, he armed the backup unit. By this time, the third operator was already airborne, racing through the fog toward a calculated intercept point, when his video feed dissolved into gray noise. The drone had been swallowed by thick mist at 0618, leaving him effectively flying blind. No instruments, no visibility. Fog scatters visible and infrared light and produces acoustic shadows. For 90 agonizing seconds, he stared at static while navigating only by compass heading and intuition. Acoustic shows bearing 290, turning west, his headset relayed. He corrected course accordingly. Physics placed hard limits on the Mi-8's options. It couldn't climb above the fog without becoming visible to radar, and it couldn't steer off the road without risking powerline collisions, many of which never appear on Russian maps. The acoustic analysts pushed constant updates, speed steady, altitude steady, following the secondary road. They had the helicopter exactly where they wanted it. The lead operator finally launched his repaired backup drone into the fog, guided purely by math toward the point where calculations said the mate must emerge, but his battery was plummeting. Cold air increases internal resistance in LiPo cells. Behind him, a Russian Borisogl-SPU electronic warfare system detected the drone launch and swept the spectrum in search of the control frequency. Yet the expressal rest system the Ukrainians used hopped between hundreds of frequencies each second, nearly impossible to jam. By the time the Russians locked onto one channel, the signal had already shifted. At 0621, the Mi-8 burst from the fog exactly where predicted, still hugging the narrow dirt road like it was following rails. The spotter drone confirmed visual contact, but the lead operator frowned at his battery indicator, 60%, with 3 kilometers to close. His drone topped out at 100 kilometers per hour, while the helicopter sped at 150. Chasing was futile, only interception mattered, and interception was nothing but unforgiving math. By 0623, he reached the ambush site, battery now screaming at 40%. He parked his drone 5 meters above an open field beside the road, motors barely spinning to save power. Each percentage point represented roughly 7 seconds of flight. His analog 5.8 GHz video feed flickered like a broken kaleidoscope, but analog's 20 milliseconds latency still beat digital's 100 ms, lag critical when milliseconds meant success or failure. The other two operators positioned themselves as fallback options, hovering at alternate points. Russian troops nearby had heard the drone's telltale buzz and radioed warnings. Meanwhile, the Borisov crew continued chasing phantom signals as the frequency system scattered across dozens of channels per second, nothing but static to enemy ears. Then the telltale rhythm of the mate's 5-blade rotor grew louder. The acoustic network reported a perfect triangulation with 50-meter accuracy. The helicopter flew dark, no lights, no radio, blind to electronic threats and blind to the drone hovering invisibly in its path. A brief break in the clouds let sunlight glance off the canopy, glass a momentary flash giving exact speed, altitude, and vector. 300 meters, 40 meters altitude, 10 seconds. At 0624, the Mi-8 thundered overhead. The operator slammed the throttle. The drone shot upward, immediately hammered by chaotic rotor wash, spinning violently as the operator fought to stabilize the view through nearly unreadable static. Their relative speed closed painfully, slowly, roughly 50 kilometers per hour. The Mi-8 still pulled ahead, but the operator had practiced this maneuver thousands of times in simulators. Only this time, failure wasn't a reset, it was the end of history being written. The second drone hovered ready for a second strike if needed, while the third documented everything. From the footage, it is unclear whether the Russian crew ever noticed the approaching drone. What happened next, however, is unmistakable. Impact, 06 to 5 hours, the shape charge detonated instantly. The PG-7 warhead unleashed a focused jet of molten copper, a product of the Monroe effect, accelerating to nearly 8,000 meters per second, capable of cutting through 300 millimeters of rolled steel. The mate's thin aluminum hull, barely 2 millimeters thick, offered no resistance. Flames engulfed the aircraft within moments as it spiraled into a field. The spotter drone descended to capture confirmation footage of the downed helicopter. The Russian EW crew, still jamming non-existent signals, learned of the loss only once the Mi-8's emergency beacon activated. By then, the Ukrainian operators had already packed up, relocating before counterfire arrived. A $500 homemade drone, guided by a network of hidden partisans and improvised engineering, had just accomplished what modern militaries long believed impossible: the first confirmed FPV drone kill of a helicopter in combat history. Bye for now.